Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Hassan Khalid. So today we are gonna discuss about the limitation of GDP and alternative measure of well-being. What is GDP? GDP is gross domestic product. GDP is the total value of output of goods, services produced within an economy in a given period of time. Economic growth. Economic growth is the increase in value of the goods and services produced by an economy over a period of time. It is conventionally measured as the percent rate of increase in real GDP. Growth is usually calculated in real terms, inflation adjusted terms, in order to net out the effect of inflation on the price of the goods and services produced. In economics, economic growth typically refers to growth of potential output, production at full employment, which is caused by growth in aggregate demand or observed output. GDP as a measure of living standard. Ceteris paribus, the standard of living tends to increase when GDP per capita increases. This makes GDP a proxy equivalent for standards of living rather than a direct measure of it. GDP has the key attraction of internationally agreed standards for calculation. Limitations of GDP. GDP does not take into account certain economic activities such as non-market activities. GDP does not measure goods and services that people make or do themselves, such as caring for children, mowing lawns, or cooking dinner. Negative externalities. Unintended economic side effects such as pollution have monetary value that is often not reflected in GDP. The underground economy. There is much economic activity which, although income is generated, never reported to the government. Example include black market transactions and under the table wages. Quality of life. Although GDP is often used as a quality of life measurement, there are factors not covered by it. This includes leisure time, pleasant surroundings, and personal safety. Human happiness. Quality of time beyond market, non-market activities. Externalities, environmental factors. Black market, informal economy. Sustainability, the long run view. Makeup of GDP. Balance of spending.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Hussain Mohammad Selim and my matric number is 1813267. So I will be talking about the happiness and well-being, non-market activities, environmental factors, and the shadow economy. So let's us begin to happiness and well-being. Happiness is a mental or emotional state of well-being characterized by positive or pleasant emotion ranging from contentment of intense joy. Happiness as a concept seems to be readily embraced by the majority of people and appears to be more valued than the pursuit of money, moral goodness, or going to heaven. Philosophers and religious thinkers often define happiness in terms of living a good life or flourishing rather than simply as an emotion. Happiness economics suggests that measure of public happiness should be used to supplement more traditional economics measures when evaluating the Success of public policy. Happy people are healthy people. Happy people live longer and enjoy a greater quality of life. They function at a higher level, utilizing their personal strengths, skill, and abilities to contribute contributes to their own well-being as well as that of others and society. Well-being is a contented state of being happy and healthy and prosperous. Psychological well-being refers to how people evaluate their lives. This evaluation may be in the form of cognitions or in the form of affect. The cognitive part is an information-based appraisal of one's life, that is when a person gives conscious evaluative judgment about own satisfaction with life as a whole. So, a good measure of the standard of living should include a measure of the increased value of leisure that society gets. The next limitation of GDP is non market activities. Besides, what GDP does not cover is the non-market economic activities. But the concept of GDP it reflects the market value of the final products and services. For the products and services that are not exchanged on the market, their value are hard to evaluate. For example, the household works finished by the full-time housewives like cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the old and children are not paid in by the family, so they are not included in the calculate of GDP. But if their work are done by the babysitter who are hired and paid by the families, they will be covered by GDP since they have the market value. In developed countries, there is a high level of the marketization of housework. The children will be sent to kindergarten, olds to the nursing home. People have more chances to eat outside instead of cooking at home. All this work will be calculated in GDP. But in developing countries, most of the housework is finished by the number of the family, and their efforts are not recognized by the market and the GDP. The same household work will make different contribution to the calculation of GDP in different countries. In the, in the calculation of GDP, the lack of these non-market economic activities reduce the ability of GDP to give a full reflection of the economic activities. So it could not tell the complete welfare people get from the economic activities. Environmental fact. Except for the limitation in calculating the complete content and quality of the economic growth, GDP also cannot reflect the hidden cost of the economic growth, particularly the environmental cost of the economic activities. GDP only covers the cost that could be exchanged and value in the market. This environmental fact, like the environmental disruption and pollution, usually cannot be valued in the market and they are not calculated by GDP. When developing the country, it is needed to consume the natural resources for the environment, but the resources are limited. The excessive usage of the resources in the current economics activities could have a negative influence on the future development, and the economic growth is not sustainable in this model, but this cannot be reflected by GDP. Meanwhile, economic growth could cause environmental disruption and pollution. These are also the cost of economic growth. However, they are not included in GDP since Mother Nature does not change the price in humans' economic activities, and the stupid human will not calculate this cost until they pay for it. The shadow economy. The shadow economy or black market refers to cash and barter transactions that are not formally recorded in GDP and are often used to support the trade of illegal goods and services such as drugs, weapons, prostitution, etc. The scale of underground economics varies greatly between nations, and in some cases they make up a substantial percentage of a country's economic output. The underground market is almost impossible to estimate or value, and due to its illegal nature, it is rarely incorporated into a nation's published GDP figure. Thus, some nations' economic output may be understated by GDP.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Akash Tarikur Rahman and my meeting number is 1733113. So today I am going to presenting the sustainability of growth. So number one is GDP does not measure the sustainability of growth. A country may achieve a temporary high GDP by over exploring natural resource or by investment. Many countries are rich with natural resources remain poor. This is known as the natural resource cost. Other countries have successful investment income from their endowment of natural resource to build a more sustainability of growth model. Norway of the biggest sovereign weight of funds in the world, estimate to be the worth on 1 crore by 2020. Uganda, the 2008 national oil and gas policy required that an appropriate farm work be put in place to aid the sustainable management of oil and gas revenue. The make-up of GDP 1. The composition of GDP may be different. E.g. difference varies the consumer goods. A country that product all military goods and services may have a high GDP, but it will have a lower level of welfare if society does not value the military expended and would be prefer some consumer goods. Defense expensive as a person GDP. Japan 1%, Lebanon 4.4%. Saudi Arabia for 8.4%, UK 2.6%, USA 4.7% worldwide.
If we talk about the alternative measure of well-being, then the first comes the UNDP Human Development Index. Human Development Index HDI, a composite index measuring average achievement in their basic dimension of human development, a long and healthy life, knowledge, and a decent standard of living. Composition of HDI: three basic things: knowledge, long and healthy life, a decent standard of living. Knowledge: first, an educational component made up of two statistics, mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling. Long and healthy life: school, a life expectancy component is calculated using a minimum value for life expectancy, at least 25 years of maximum and value of 85 years. A decent standard of living. The final element is gross national income GNI per capita, justice to pursuing power parity standard PPP. HDA progress. We can see at the graph that UNDP classified each country into one of the three development bins. Low human development for HDI scores between 0.0 and 0.5. Low human development for HDI scores between 0.0 and 0.5. Medium human development for HDI scores between 0.5 and 0.8. High human development for HDI across between 0.8 and 1.0. And as we can see at the GDP and HDI ranking, later we can see trade integration and HDI progress. There has some limitations of HDI. The HDI notably fails to take account of qualitative factors such as cultural identity and political freedoms, human security, gender opportunities, and human rights, for example. Many argue that the HDI should become more human-centered and expanded to include more dimensions ranging from the gender equity to environmental biodiversity. The GNP per capita figure and consequently the HDI figure takes no account of income distribution. If income is unfairly distributed, the GNP per capita will be an inaccurate measure of the monetary well-being of the people. Inequitable development is not human development. PPP values change very quickly and are likely to be inaccurate or misleading. The 2010 edition of the Human Development Report marked the launch of a new inequality that would adjusted HDI and also a gender inequality index and a multidimensional poverty index inequality HDI. The average loss in the HDI due to inequality is about 23%. That is adjusted for inequality. The global HDI of 0.682 in 2011 would fall to 0.525. There are some key points that HDI is intended to allow economists to draw broad conclusions about which countries enjoy relatively high standards of living and which are by comparison underdeveloped. For the recovering the limitations of HDI index, there has some multidimensional poverty index that first introduced in 2010, and it an attempt designed to illustrate the many deprivations faced by the most severely disadvantaged. The MPI requires a household to be deprived in multiple indicators at the same time. A person is multidimensionally poor if the weighted indicators in which he or she is deprived and add up to at least 33%. The MPI is closely linked to the Millennium Development Goals targets and include the below components. The first one is possession of some assets. The second one is nutrition. Third one is child mortality. Fourth one, access to drinking water. And the fifth one, access to sanitation. And later on, access to a safe room, access to electricity. On the other hand, there has access to an Europe cooking oil, years of schooling, and the last to enroll in school. Thank you for watching.